Ice Age peak. Being born during the Ice Age meant one thing. Your life came with a timer and the cold controlled it. This wasn't a world where you grew up and then learned how to survive. Survival was the childhood. If your group couldn't keep moving, keep hunting, and keep a fire alive, you didn't get a second chance. At first glance, it almost looks simple. You stick close to your people, you follow herds, you sleep in whatever shelter you can build fast. Food comes from muscle and patience. Warmth comes from fire and animal hide. Every day is a loop. Find calories, protect the group, avoid getting separated. The problem is that the Ice Age didn't care how smart you were. It cared how long you could last. And the danger wasn't just the big animals. Yes, there were predators like cave lions and packs of wolves. And yes, hunting something like a woolly mammoth could easily get you crushed. Still, the real tension sat in the smaller things that never made heroic stories. A broken bone, a deep cut, a tooth infection, even a mild illness. With no antibiotics, no surgery, and no way to rest up in a safe place, small injuries had room to turn into death sentences. Then comes the hardest truth. The Ice Age didn't need to attack you directly. It only needed to make everything harder. Finding food, staying warm, keeping children alive, and wait for your body to lose the argument. In that era, the planet felt like an enemy. Toba, supervolcano. Era. Some eras try to kill you with teeth and claws. This one tried to kill you with the sky. If you were born around the time the Toba supervolcano erupted, your biggest enemy wasn't an animal or another tribe. It was the planet flipping the table on everyone at once. Early humans already lived close to the edge. Food came from hunting and gathering, and survival depended on staying mobile, staying alert, and staying in groups that could actually protect each other. There was no storage room full of grain, no backup plan. No, we'll just wait it out. Every day was a math problem. Find enough calories or disappear. Then Toba erupted in what's considered one of the largest volcanic explosions in the last 2 million years. It blasted enormous amounts of ash into the atmosphere, and that ash helped block sunlight and push the climate into a volcanic winter. Temperatures dropped, rainfall patterns shifted, and ecosystems started breaking down. Plants struggled, animals thinned out, food chains snapped like cheap rope. Here's where the nightmare tightens. This wasn't a single bad week. The volcanic winter likely lasted years. That means the problem wasn't escaping the blast zone. The problem was waking up every day to a world that stopped producing enough life to feed you. Hunters chase fewer herds. Gatherers find less edible land. Children need food even when nature is giving out nothing. Some scientists have argued that this period may have contributed to a massive human population bottleneck, with humanity shrinking to a dangerously small number. Even if the exact numbers are debated, the survival pressure was real. Dawn of agriculture. The moment humans learned to farm, they also learned a new way to suffer. Settling down sounds like progress on paper. More food, more stability, fewer dangerous hunts, a permanent home, a future. The problem is that farming packed them together, tied them to one patch of land, and made survival depend on a single fragile system. Early farming communities began growing crops like wheat and barley, and keeping animals nearby. That meant food could be produced in one place, stored, and shared. It also meant humans started living in dense villages with constant contact, constant waste, and constant exposure to new diseases. When people lived far apart as hunter-gatherers, outbreaks had a harder time spreading. Villages changed that math fast. Then the body starts paying the price. Diets often became less varied, with heavy reliance on grains. Archaeological evidence from early farming populations shows signs of nutritional stress, including enamel defects in teeth, anemia, indicators in bones, and higher rates of dental cavities and wear. Your food supply became more predictable, yet your health often became more fragile. And the real tension sits in the dependency. Farming locks you into seasons. If the rains fail, the harvest fails. If pests arrive, the harvest fails. If a flood wipes out your stored grain, the village doesn't just have a bad month, it has a death schedule. Hunter-gatherers could move when a region ran dry. Farmers had homes, fields, and growing food they couldn't carry. The hardest truth comes later. Agriculture didn't simply create civilization, it created population growth. And population growth created vulnerability. More people meant more mouths, and more mouths meant less room for error. Once you planted the first field, you planted the first trap. America's after contact. Being born in this era meant you could do everything right and still lose. You could have food, family, shelter, and a strong community. Then an invisible enemy shows up and starts deleting entire towns without a battle. At first, life in many indigenous societies across the Americas was structured and stable in its own way. People farmed, traded, built cities, formed alliances, and fought wars that still followed human limits. Empires like the Aztec and Inca managed huge populations and complex systems. Communities in North America, Central America, and South America had their own political networks, spiritual worlds, and survival strategies shaped by the land. Then the contact opened a door that could not be closed. Europeans arrived carrying pathogens that had circulated for centuries across Africa, Asia, and Europe. Smallpox, measles, influenza, and more. Over there, generations of exposure created some level of immune resistance. In the Americas, those diseases were new. That meant outbreaks moved like wildfire through populations that had no biological preparation for them. The pressure builds fast. Trade routes became disease routes. Crowded homes became transmission zones. Caregiving became dangerous. Entire leadership structures collapsed when elders died. Farming cycles broke when workers couldn't stand. Communities faced waves of sickness that kept returning before recovery was even possible. And then comes the hardest truth. Historians widely agree that disease caused the largest share of indigenous deaths after contact, leading to catastrophic population declines across the continents. In many regions, the collapse was so severe that conquest became easier because societies were already shattered. You didn't have to be conquered to be destroyed. Europe's Great Famine. One day bread exists, the next day it costs too much, and then one morning the ovens go quiet and the panic starts. During this time, your life could be decided by weather patterns you never even understood. Medieval Europe already ran on thin margins. Most people lived off what they could grow, store, and trade locally. A good harvest meant survival. A weak harvest meant hunger. Families had routines built around seasons, church calendars, and the hope that next year would behave. The problem is that nature didn't care about schedules. From 1315 onward, heavy rains and cold conditions hit large parts of northern Europe. Crops failed repeatedly. Grain couldn't dry. Fields turned to mud. Livestock suffered too, and food prices rose hard. When the supply breaks in a society with almost no reserves, the stress spreads everywhere at once. Cities start rationing. Villages start emptying. People start traveling just to find anything edible. Then the pressure turns personal. Malnutrition weakens bodies, and weakened bodies invite disease. Parents struggle to feed children. Communities struggle to keep order. Crime rises because hunger has no manners. Chronic hunger also wrecks long-term health, leaving survivors more vulnerable for years afterward. The hardest part comes later, when the famine stops being just starvation and starts becoming social collapse. Historical accounts describe desperation that pushed people into acts they would never admit out loud. Governments responded with laws and punishments, yet they couldn't arrest the rain. By the time the worst years passed, entire regions had lost huge portions of their population, and Europe was left physically weakened right before the next catastrophe arrived in the mid-14th century. Hunger used to break people. Plague of Justinian. Empires love to look invincible. Disease loves to prove them wrong. If you were born during the Plague of Justinian, you entered a world where the strongest government on earth could still be humbled by something small enough to ride on a flea. The Eastern Roman Empire, often called the Byzantine Empire, was powerful in the 6th century. Its capital, Constantinople, was a crowded megacity for its time, fed by grain shipments and held together by trade routes stretching across the Mediterranean. Under Emperor Justinian I, the empire was fighting wars, collecting taxes, and trying to rebuild old Roman glory. Life was hard for ordinary people, yet the system still functioned. Ships arrived, markets moved, laws were enforced, society kept marching. Then the plague arrived in 541. Ancient accounts, including the historian Procopius, describe a sickness tearing through the population with terrifying speed. Modern research often connects this outbreak to Yersinia pestis, the same bacterium linked to later plague pandemics. The disease spread through ports and cities connected by trade, turning the empire's strength into a weakness. The more connected the world was, the faster the death traveled. The pressure builds because this wasn't a single city tragedy. Outbreaks hit Constantinople hard, then rolled through other regions. Labor vanished. Food supply chains strained. Military campaigns weakened. Tax revenue collapsed. When a state loses workers, soldiers, and stability at the same time, everything becomes fragile. Then comes the hardest punch. This plague did not simply pass and disappear. It returned in waves over the following decades, and many historians see it as a major factor in long-term economic and demographic damage across the Mediterranean world. In that era, the empire bled out slowly. 30 Years' War era. Some wars are fought to win. This one was fought until people forgot what winning even looked like. The conflict began inside the Holy Roman Empire, triggered by religious and political tension between Catholic and Protestant powers. It started with the kind of event that sounds small until it isn't: the defenestration of Prague in 1618, when officials were thrown out a window and Europe took that personally. Armies began moving, alliances formed. Kings and emperors treated the region like a chessboard, and the civilians became the pieces that got swept off the table. The danger builds because the war didn't stay clean or contained. Soldiers needed food, shelter, and money, and they often took it by force. Towns were looted, villages were burned, fields were destroyed. Even when armies left, hunger stayed behind like smoke. Then disease arrived, because large groups of starving people living in chaos create perfect conditions for outbreaks. The war didn't just kill with swords, it killed with empty barns and infected wounds. Then comes the break. In many German territories, population losses were catastrophic. Historians estimate that parts of the Holy Roman Empire lost around 20% of their population, and some areas suffered far worse. Entire communities disappeared, economies collapsed, local order cracked. For many people, survival meant hiding, fleeing, or watching everything you owned become someone else's meal. The cruelest part is that the war kept going even after the land was already ruined. It fed on the wreckage it created. In that era, peace was a miracle. World War II. The war proved that modern life can collapse in a week. You see, before the war swallowed everything, millions of families lived ordinary lives across Poland, the Soviet Union, Germany, and the surrounding regions. Work, school, markets, churches, farms. Politics was tense, yet most people still believed tomorrow would look like today. Then, September 1939 arrived, and the idea of stability got crushed between invading armies. The pressure rises because the war turned entire populations into targets. Cities were bombed, villages were burned, food systems broke under occupation and constant fighting. People were uprooted by force, pushed into ghettos, deported across borders, or sent to camps. On the Eastern Front, the fighting became especially brutal. German and Soviet forces treated land and civilians as resources to be used up. Starvation became a weapon. Mass shootings became routine. Entire communities vanished in days. Then comes the break, and it hits late for a reason. This war not only killed soldiers but also civilians on a scale the world had never seen. The Holocaust murdered 6 million Jews, alongside millions of other victims targeted by Nazi policies. The Soviet Union alone lost tens of millions of people, both military and civilian. Across Europe, the total death toll reached into the tens of millions, and entire regions were left physically and psychologically wrecked. Being born in that era meant your life could be destroyed before you even understood what a country was.